Okay. Well, I'm going to start with our first introduction. Tonight we have Christine Woodward and Amanda Bridges speaking with us, and we're going to start with Christine. If you could please mute your microphones. We have some strange feedback at the moment. Christine and I met somewhat recently, but we immediately took a liking to each other, so much so that we are now working together. And she comes from the architecture industry, working in interior design and architecture, before determining that what she most wanted to do was create a consulting business to support interior designers, architects, and allied professionals with many of the business services that enable their practices to be truly successful. It recognizes the fact that we are at heart entrepreneurs, and yet we don't necessarily have much training in how to be successful entrepreneurs. And Christine offers a suite of services, everything from executive search to financial advice to business development to strategy. I'm sure I've forgotten something, but with no further ado, welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for the great introduction. I do want to say too, when we say that is all those services are offered, that's not by me. I'm not a superwoman. We have an incredible team of experts behind me that or under the umbrella that offer those expertise. So I don't know if we wanted to introduce Amanda as well and then or go in straight with my story. I think that's how we were doing it, right? The latter. Yeah. Okay, great. So I'll share a bit about myself, my journey. It actually started in another career. I was in advertising in New York. So it's a bit circuitous. And when I realized that wasn't the creative career I wanted, in fact, I was in one of the midtown high-rise buildings, going to a conference room, trying to corral the creatives to get to their meeting. It just made me realize it wasn't the creative side I wanted to do. I wanted to make a bigger impact that people actually felt. So then I went back to California. I'm a California native, went back to California, started an interior design firm, realized it was the built industry that I wanted to be a part of. And I didn't want to hit a glass ceiling. So with the intention of always practicing interior design, I went and got a master's in architecture. Simultaneous to that, I received studies in management at Harvard. I should have probably listened to a little bit of that desire for wanting an MBA, but I went ahead and went 15 years in an interior design career. I'm now in my MBA at Johns Hopkins to round out my passion for business. And it was about 5 years ago that I launched the consultancy that Nancy was speaking to, that is really trying to be the right-hand woman or team to the interior design industry and architecture, so the A&D. And it, I think I would never have guessed I would have gone this route at all, the business side of things. I just kept gravitating toward the business side and operations while at the design firms. So liking design, but wanting to really push those internal initiatives forward, whether it was committees or this or that. So I'm a mom, 6 and 8 year old, and I think that's pretty much rounds out my entire journey of how I've gotten to where I am today. And I think I'll take any questions, but what I want to impart on individuals.
Jamie, what sheet number are you tagging the plumbing on? A what? For
yeah. Christina, just so you know, you're
sorry.
That's all right. So what I think would be important that I wish my younger self or myself 15 years ago would have heard from someone who was successful in their career, no matter which way it took them after architecture school, would have been not to be embarrassed or ashamed of the circuitous path that they took. That whether they stayed in architecture, even though they have a master's in architecture, or not, that there's no embarrassment or shame in that, and that every one of these decisions that they make along the way led to the great impact that they're making on the world, right? Because if we act with that embarrassment or shame along the way, then we aren't giving to the world the best of ourselves. We're kind of almost putting out only half of ourselves because of that shame kind of tying us down. So that would be my parting wisdom if I had to say that in a quick nutshell, but would love to take any comments or thoughts on that. And actually, before I open that up to the floor, it is for those reasons that we're launching a confidence training program for women. Women tend to innately have a lower bar when it comes to confidence. We'll open it up to men, women, children, and seniors as the program gets a bit further developed. But it's actually from my own journey that we're launching a program for that. So, comments, thoughts? Anyone kind of going through something similar or?
So, Christine, it would be great to
yeah.
hear about how your business evolved from the first of the services that you offered, and then how you started to layer on additional services, and what you're seeing in terms of how it is enabling the designers that you work with to take on more significant work in their own practice, or to be more profitable, or things of that nature.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Nancy. So when transitioning to start my own business, I went from a design director to launching the business, taking that leap. And it was actually the last firm that I was at, Tim Murphy Design Associates, who's recently been acquired by Perkins and Will. And he helped me get my first book of clientele, and which I'm forever grateful to him in terms of that support. And, I really just offered myself without really much structure, as much as I would like to share that it had a lot of structure. It was a lot of structureless, just kind of putting myself out there and saying, look, this is what I was doing before. Here's what I can do for you now. It was pre-COVID, so you had to book me in office for full days. And then when COVID came about, it actually obliterated that model, as you can imagine, and allowed me to reinvent it under the new name of 19th & Co., which is named after the 19th Amendment, the women's right to vote. And now we have consultants all over the country, which previous to that COVID obliterating the model, we wouldn't have otherwise had. So it was very organic how we built the services. It was just, because of that organic nature, I was really running a focus group for a couple of years, understanding what were people wanting. And now it shook out to a handful of services. I still like to offer ourselves just to anything, but it was really just from gathering that information. I think there's, oftentimes throughout all of our journeys, we're wanting that answer right away. And this was one of the first times where, as my sense of urgency doesn't usually allow, I allowed it to unfold quite organically. And it's one of the best things that I've ever done in my life. I finally feel like I found my groove, and it was not that feeling when I was in any one of those other facets of my journey, professional journey. Yeah. Oh, but I don't know if I answered all that question, Nancy. It was multi-pronged. Did I?
No, it's good. A lot of our mentees, especially some who are with us today, like Tuba and Lauren Mosley, they always ask, how to have a conversation with oneself and how that guides us in the decisions we make and the paths we take. You talked a little bit about your path and, how you got to a place where you feel fulfilled. But could you take us a little bit slower through that process and tell us a bit more about your story and those steps and revelations along the way?
Absolutely. Yes, would love to. So, well, first of all, I have to say, if you haven't heard of the book before, it's from authors at Stanford and Berkeley, which is where Amanda's sitting right now. And it's called Designing Your Life. Yes, it's Designing Your Life. They have Designing Your Work Life now, but highly recommend it. And it's from, you can be 15 years old, you can be 85 years old. It is for everyone. And it's incredibly validating because they use design thinking to figure out what to do in your life. It's as simple as I can put it. And what I took from that, to Anik, to answer some of your questions on that, one of the best things was this little gas tank gauge that they put as an activity that says what fills you with energy and what kind of depletes that. I don't want to say some of the things that deplete it, but what fills my tank was talking to people. I mean, I was just, right. So any of those, or that prompt that you mentioned, some of the mentees talked about, is like that self-talk. I think it's being really honest with yourself of the simple things that really fill your tank up, right? What really gives you energy, and be really honest. It doesn't have to be, oh, when I'm sketching buildings, like it doesn't have to be that. Mine, I was as raw as possible. I said, I love talking to people. It energizes me. I can remember that one because I felt quite embarrassed that I wrote that. I was like, I could talk all day long. And if that could be my life, which I created a consultancy that allowed me that. So I hate to say that term manifested because it's so woo-woo, but I wrote it down and I identified that for myself. And that's what I want to emphasize, that don't hold back from being just really raw and documenting and inventorying what those feelings are and what fuels you. As simple as I like to talk all day. So I hope that helps to fill in the blanks for that self-talk, but that self-talk too of like, if you ever catch yourself saying should, you know you're inappropriately speaking to yourself. I hope that helps too. Yeah.
Yeah, and along the way, you know, we make these, we have these realizations and we think of a path forward. And Christine, for you, did you take those steps alone, or were there people who helped you along the way? And if there were people helping you along the way, who were they and what did they do? Did you ask also?
Great prompt. Definitely people along the way. I'm actually one to not ask. So as outgoing as I seem, asking people feels like a burden that I'm kind of putting on them. And so I'm not one to ask, hey, you know, I'm working this out. Can we talk? Like, that is not my style. When COVID hit and obliterated my business model, I was just kind of woe is me to a friend. And it was when it opened up kind of the conversation or the opportunity to say, look, I love what I'm doing, but you know, I don't want to do it alone. And then I kept hearing that from colleague, from friend to friend, that I love my expertise. I love the wheelhouse that I kind of reside in, but I don't want to do a business on my own. And that's when I started seeing that common thread. But in terms of any juncture in my very nonlinear journey, there has been, I should have asked more. I should have asked more people. I should have asked some mentors. I should have asked for a mentor, you know, can you be my mentor in whatever capacity? I now do that. And you know what the turning point was? My thesis. When you had to have a bunch of advisors, and I thought it was absolutely outrageous that they asked, like, it was my responsibility to ask my advisors, to ask them for their time, because it was like, who am I? And to ask for an hour, like once a week, and then actually physically come to a meeting to review my work, like, who am I? But it was game changing. The fact that I had to do that, I can't remember now. What is that? I think you do a thesis for like a year, right? So I think it was a year. So much trauma. I don't remember the duration, but that was a pivotal moment in my life where I learned to ask people for time. And now I do it constantly. And I realize when I ask for their time, there's actually something in exchange that I can give them. And it's really exciting to uncover that. And when I'm on a call and I've asked for something and they keep giving me their time, I keep thinking, literally, it happened today, what is in this for them? And sometimes I think the answer is nothing, except for it makes them feel good to help. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, when you go out into the world and you ask for someone's advice, it's a compliment. You're depriving people of compliments by not asking. So.
That's a great way to frame it. And it kind of reinforces our entire objective in gathering here together, because while people don't always know what they want to ask, just providing an example that opens the door to mentorship is really very much aligned with our mission.
Yeah. And I think also I was going to say, even as someone who's been a thesis advisor actually for others, what I've learned to do is just set a bi-weekly meeting. And then the student can say to me like, oh, I can't meet this week, or they don't have to reach out. And I think a group like this, where it's like, you know, providing like an awesome space or place for people to ask questions to this without sometimes having to make that sort of what could feel like a scary leap or jump or ask, is like really awesome to sort of always, you know what I mean? Not just tell people, oh, you can knock on the door, but like actively leave the door open, or like, you know what I mean? Walk through it with like hand in hand with people and sort of really reach out to them. So yeah, I definitely know that same feeling. But.
Right. Yeah.
So, Christine, have you found with your clients that there's, in some regards, a mentorship type of situation in your relationship with them, or the relationship they end up developing with other consultants that you work with?
Are you asking, I almost act as a mentor to them? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
I'm really asking sort of for a description of what those relationships are like and if they take on a mentoring type of quality.
Yeah. You know, as wild as it may seem, every one of the owners and client that have ever worked with, um, you know, they're kind of alone. I mean, that statement or that saying of it's lonely at the top, it's real. And they're lonely with regards to the advice and knowing what other people are doing, right? So we're kind of an aggregator of all these firms and how they do things. And I can't tell you that even on a potential new client meeting or call, I'll say, if you take nothing else from this, please know that what you're going through right now is normal. You know, either your pipeline's low, don't worry about it. Everyone else is going through it too, or whatever the case may be. I don't know. I feel like it's my life's mission to make people feel like they're normal. And I think because so often we, you know, there's a psychological term of psychology term of spotlight effect. We all think, oh, everyone's looking at me, and oh, someone's cranky, or my boss is mad at, and it's, oh, it must be me, right? All these things, or I'm the only one suffering from a light pipeline, or whatever the case may be. And I want everyone to feel like the journey you're on is normal and it's the right one for you, even if it doesn't feel right at the moment. But it turns into a mentoring situation, even in this consultative kind of role I play. I guess I don't even like calling it a mentor just because they mentor me at the same time. You know, I get the opportunity to be inside their business and kind of pull back the drapes. And I get to see the hardships that they've, you know, the sacrifices, the decisions they had to make, how they led to where they are now. And I feel grateful for being able to learn all of that so that I can take that for my own business. So it's been a back and forth, and that's why I say you're kind of a jerk, you guys, if you don't ask people for their as a compliment, because they get the chance to help and they want to help. And frankly, it becomes low-hanging fruit because they want to help, but it would take an effort to be like, okay, where can I go find an opportunity to go and mentor someone? But if you just serve it up on a silver platter, they're like, oh, thank you. I've been wanting to make this a part of my journey, my personal journey, right? And so you just make it that much easier. So asking is a compliment, and you should do it to give them low-hanging fruit for sure. Because it goes back and forth. You're giving to them as well. Yeah.
I was going to say, actually, also so other people joining the meeting know is that Christine, when I current job or role, Christine and I was connected with Christine as someone who was helping with the search for my current firm. And so for me, I was going to say, I could speak to that a bit, where I definitely felt a mentoring relationship with Christine, where I felt that, you know, connecting with someone where I was like, you know, yes, I have experience in Revit and drawing details and doing this and that, but I also like talking, or I do this, or I also like teaching and other things. And to connect with someone who had that sort of design background experience and business experience, what it can be to want to be able to participate in something like this or other things was really awesome. I felt like it was someone who understood where I'm coming from and where I want to go. And so to me, that is definitely a type of mentorship. And I can speak, I was going to say that Christina was great at it, a great person to sort of help me on my journey in that way.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, some back story on that. Right. So one of the services we offer is recruiting. I'm the one that spearheads that service. And it was Amanda that I found for an amazing firm. And she's an amazing candidate. I was so excited to take her to them. And she is still with them today. So thanks for the shout out, Amanda.
It's kind of the perfect opening for me to introduce Amanda, although I'd like to take a short break also to introduce Haley Cooper-Smith, who's with us, who wants to give us just a quick announcement about a project event at the Brooklyn Navy Yards. So I don't want to lose everybody at the end of this Zoom call. So Haley, if you just wanted to say a brief word about the event, and then I'll introduce Amanda.
Thank you, and thank you for taking the time for me to make this quick announcement. Christine, after hearing your remarks, I think this is actually the perfect event for those of you who will be in Brooklyn next Thursday. It's Thursday, March 21st, from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. A few ways to get to the Navy Yard. I'll drop some links in the chat after I finish talking. Excuse me while I read from the paper, because I did plan the event. I'm very proud of it, but I also started like 2 months ago, so I just want to make sure I hit all my points. Okay, so the Yard is a diverse community of creators across multiple fields there's 550 businesses here. And I wish I pulled out how many architectural firms are here and how many are run or have female principals, because there's a lot. And it's something really cool about the Yard. There's a lot of women-owned businesses, of Black women-owned businesses, and it's something we're really proud of at the Yard, to feature these types of businesses. And as someone who has a background in the arts, my background's in art history and museums, it's really cool to see how many arts-based businesses are here at the Yard. More about the program. The program is called In Conversation, Women in STEAM, and there's going to be 4 breakout sessions. So I'll talk a little bit about the program. In Conversation, Women in STEAM brings together women who have successfully navigated careers in STEAM fields and those interested in pivoting or advancing their careers in STEAM. Co-hosted by Black Women Talk Tech, attendees will have the opportunity to join different conversations over the course of the evening. Led by knowledgeable facilitators, including In Cho, who I've been told is a common feature in these programs here that you guys have.
We are huge fans of In Cho.
So am I. Just met her. She's lovely. So really excited that she's going to be hosting one of our roundtables. Each roundtable will be centered around building community and sharing collective experiences that support the growth of women in STEAM fields. Because we know it's really hard sometimes to be a woman in these fields, especially women of color. So we hope this program specifically brings people in community together and highlights just community in the fields and how to, make connections. A little bit about the series. This series, the In series, is focused on bringing industry professionals together in conversation and community. And it's actually curated in support of the exhibition that we have on right now, which is called In Motion, Handcrafting Industry. Each program has a networking component. You can talk and share business cards, get a drink, get a bite of food, as well as a structured program, which is in this case, it's the roundtables, where participants will engage in critical conversations with their peers to support growth of their brands, businesses, and professional networks. That's my little spiel. And I'll put in I'm going to drop the Eventbrite link in. So if you're in Brooklyn, and then I'll drop a link in of how to get to the Navy Yard, because it is a bit confusing for those of you who know we're downtown Brooklyn where we are. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, if you think of any questions, put them in a chat, and I'm sure we'll get to them either in this session or thereafter. We know how to get in touch with you.
Yes, I'm also going to put my email there. That's my email. So I'm Haley Coopersmith, and I'm going to put how to get to the Navy Yard. That's always the #1 question. How do I get to you?
Just a little additional shout out for those of you who are in New York and who are not familiar with the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It's really like a theme park of interesting things. I was fortunate as a child to get to go to the Navy Yard before it was renovated and when it was still a very industrial park. And it really is amazing what goes on there. So even if you don't really know why you're going and what you're going there to see, you will be not only pleasantly surprised, but fascinated by what you find. So this is a good offer from Haley. Some of you ought to take her up on it.
Yeah, and it's a back-to-back event, 21st at the Navy Yards and the 22nd at the Alloy Development. So if you're in Brooklyn, come and join us.
It's a really, to talk about the buildings for a second. There's some buildings, so my office is in a building that's from like 1700s, and attached to it is a building that was built maybe 10 years ago, and it's built around an anchor from a ship that was built here, 25,000 pound anchor. So, it's very cool architecturally. That's where the event will be, in that building that I'm talking about. It's like heated from the floor. So architecturally, it's also a very cool space.
Right. Well, thank you. And
you're welcome.
Welcome to Alicia Sainville, who's also one of our mentors. She was had a seminar in November 2022, and she's been logging on with us many times over since. And she and I serve on the board of the Office of the Professions together. So see each other every 3 months and on Zoom. So without further ado, Amanda, thank you for coming to this event, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say about your path in architecture. So Amanda is a senior architect at SILE in San Francisco, and SILE is a integrated architecture, interiors, and landscape design practice. but she's also an educator. She has just spoken at Stanford today, right? You just came
Yeah.
from Stanford. She
Or
also
I'm here.
is an adjunct lecturer at Berkeley, California, and she is a member of NOMA, a lead AP, and has worked on a range of projects from urban, commercial, and custom homes throughout the US. But she is going to talk a bit with us about her path in architecture and also her forward thinking about where we are in our profession and how the profession needs to shift in its culture. So without further ado, Amanda.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me today. I came from a final review at Stanford. So I'm actually still, I snuck, they snuck me a conference room. So I am still here and excited to be on a campus as always, but thank you so much for having me today. I have worked on a range of project types. I've worked on at a range of some of that, but some of what I want to talk to today and not just talk about, but actually listen to and to everyone and see, sort of get everyone's take on are some ideas in the field and around how we can change the culture, as has been said before. Not to sound so negative about it, but one story I do like to tell is that the first day of my MArch 1 program at Yale, Peter Eisenman told us, architecture doesn't solve problems, it creates them. Yikes was my first and immediate thought. And I thought, should I just leave now? That is certainly not what I'm interested in, is just quote unquote causing problems. And I thought it just sounded very defeatist. And with all due respect, Peter Eisenman, very notable architect. But to be honest, I have basically tried to build a career in fierce opposition to that type of stagnation since. Causing problems. Although I don't entirely disagree that causing problems, spatially, environmentally, and in our own lives and sanity is how architecture has sometimes been done in the past. I do think that there's a lot of strength in our current younger generation and potentially in all the rest of us in the optimism and faith that we really can work differently, do better, and most importantly, feel better. I sometimes that architecture is approximately a century behind, which I think is also great, Christy, in the 9th, 18th and co. I always say, you know, so the women's suffrage era in 1919 and 1920 is about 100 years ago. And I like to say something that's like architecture. We're just seeing some of our first female deans, you know, and the culture starting to shift around gender. And I do think as a field where we're always supposed to be pushing and thinking 100 years ahead. So hopefully, you know, if you're working on anything, ideally it's going to stand for a number of decades, maybe even centuries. And I do think that we sort of have this struggle right now to sort of catch a lot of things about our culture up with the sort of technology and other amazing strides we've made in other ways. I personally have attempted to build a diverse career where I'm sometimes at a computer in the technology myself and in the software. Other days, like today, sitting on a student review at Stanford or other schools, and at conferences, mentoring sessions, other things like we are today. I also think a key part of being an architect who is responsible for building the world around us is not only exploring the world around us, but also knowing and exploring your own relationship to it, however, in whatever way possible. When everything is architecture, as Hans Hollein says in German, and we deserve to explore and experience more. So I always encourage people not to box themselves in. According to the American Institute of Architects, 1 in 5 architects report experiencing depression, and over 1 in 3 report experiencing anxiety. I personally feel that this is underreported. 1 in 5 and 1 in 3 sound a little low to me, but maybe that's just my own personal experience and take and some friends of mine. But I really do think that as people who are problem solvers, change makers, and designers, that we deserve practices and ways of learning and thinking that don't contribute so negatively sometimes to how we or our students or others feel in the world. So that's something that I'm really focused on right now, and I'll get to more of that in a bit. But so basically, I got my bachelor's degree in actually history of art and architecture at Harvard, and was cross-registered at MIT to take architecture. And eventually I did get my MArch at Yale. I, particularly while I was in school, number of post-disaster projects in New Orleans, Haiti, and other regions as well. I learned about everything from ArcGIS to how we can best listen to and learn from communities with which we work. After school, while working on private residences with Woods Dan Garin, a small firm in LA, and currently Shield Studios in San Francisco, I learned the peace and balance that can come from working at a smaller family size. We're actually about 20 people at the firm I work for now, but I do find that for me feels like a great size to sort of create a more intimate experience and culture for all of us, really foster a sense of mentorship. And to me, also being at a smaller firm, it has allowed me a little bit more time and flexibility to do things like teach, get involved with NOMA, and I'm also involved with the NAACP, the Architectural Foundation of San Francisco, and a few. I did previously work at some larger firms, including Kieran Timberlake in Philadelphia, which is where I'm from, and SOM here in San Francisco. While working on those larger civic projects and buildings around the world, I did actually find that those larger firms allowed me to be involved with BIPOC and underrepresented minority issues within the firm itself. So, for example, at SOM, I organized our first had an in-person event here in San Francisco, in the New York office, in the Chicago office, but we also had people joining us on Zoom from offices around the world. We also organized a number of events for things like Black History Month, and we also did recruitment sessions regularly with HBCUs, which is actually a program through NOMA in which many large architecture firms around the country and around the world actually are able to with students and engage them directly, which has been really, really great opportunity. I highly recommend getting involved with that program. If you run a firm or are involved with a firm, let me know if you have an interest in that, because it's a really great program. And I really, again, as I was saying a little bit earlier, I do think that when people say, how do we diversify the field, or how do we need to change it? There are actions that we can take that are more than just talking about it in circles in a room. And there are things that are really great action items. So one to me is not just, putting, just saying, oh, well, people from different kinds of backgrounds can apply to this. That's, I think sometimes isn't enough. It's how do you actually really show people, again, like not just that there is a door, but that it's open to them, and that we are actively actually working to help people enter and like cross those thresholds and make changes to this field, whether it's socioeconomically, in terms of gender, in terms of sexual orientation, what have you. Another project I worked on was with the NAACP. I did work with a company called AutoCase to develop an environmental justice tool. It's free and web-based, and I presented about it at the Net Zero conference in Los Angeles. But basically, that's another thing where we're really talking about how to create on the ground. The tool is meant to be used by architects, developers, engineers, to help them engage with community members and with real data, real environmental data, and real community members, real experts in places and in communities and in some of these fields, rather than thinking that we can handle sort of all of these things on our own within the field of just architecture alone. So with all of those sort of projects and efforts, I still find myself with the question, are we really changing the culture here? Are we just talking about the system from within it, or are we really changing it? And honestly, I think that that's what drew me most to teaching. I think teaching architecture studio in some ways doesn't sound quite, it's sort of, I'm not quite sure it's as aligned as I want it to be, but it was one attempt at sort of being on the ground with young people in this field and thinking about new ways can have to everything we do. One British study that Reba did said that architecture students are more likely than most other majors to experience mental health issues while in school. And there were surveys done with students about, okay, how can we change that? What do you need? And I thought that some of the suggestions in some of those studies were great. One was mental health workshops for students. Another was to encourage teachers to have more positive communication with students. Many students have said that they actually cited insensitivity from an instructor or review juror as a trigger for their distress and poor mental health in school. And those are things that we can change. To me, those are just things like that we can actively change and should work to change. I also think that encouraging students to spend time outside of the studio is crucial. Spending time outside in the vitamin D, but also exploring, traveling, learning more about the world around them, and gaining valuable insights and perspectives that can enrich their design work in the studio. One suggestion for that, I think anyone here who's taken a design studio might balk at this, but one suggestion for that is that studios shouldn't have 24-hour access. That architecture school studios should close at, say, midnight, which to me is actually still quite late. But if you say they close 7 or 8 a.m. I mean, hopefully that would maybe encourage a little bit more sleep, but I think that that's like the least we can do to try to get students to have a better work-life balance. I also do think it's our responsibility to prepare students and ourselves for the realities of present and future change. I do think that that includes, rather than putting up walls when it comes to things like AI or some of our sustainability challenges or other things, I think that that means encouraging students to use these ways we're revolutionizing work and design to optimize their projects and their thinking and their work, and finding the best ways to balance things that we know will be available later on. So if we introduce healthy means to engage with sort of AI, using it for, so to me, even designing or finding ways that you can use it, I think rather than saying, absolutely, you can't do this, you can't do that, can again, in schools, it's like, you shouldn't 3D print models, like that's crazy. And then, you're supposed to go to the working world and know how to 3D print models. So I think just, it's also like in architecture school, if you never go out and it's sort of like, oh, you can't have any distractions around you. And then you go into the real world, there are going to be distractions. There are going to be fun, awesome things going on in the city around you. And I just think one of the things, especially as an undergraduate teacher, that I owe to students is reaching them how they work best and how they work healthiest in the healthiest way for themselves, and really training all of us in those skills. So with that, I'll close. The thing I was going to say, kind of, that I'd be curious to hear from everyone or anyone, and then I have I asked students in a Berkeley No Mas, which is the student group session. I said, how can we each better support the field in this? How can we better support each other? I mean, this is a really awesome group here of women and men doing amazing things in the field. And then also, how can we better support ourselves? So how can you better support yourself, I think, is also something to kind of regularly engage with and think about. And with that, thanks for your attention. That's it. Any questions or thoughts?
I would love to jump in here. Thank you, Amanda, for many reasons, not the least of which is that in 4 weeks, I will be giving a presentation on culture myself to a bunch of people in our industry. But my first comment is that in the spectrum of time in my career, 30-something years, the amount of change that there has been in how we execute design projects, in how we create buildings, in the technologies we use, in the materials they're made of. The amount of change in the past 30 years has been astounding, especially when you consider that in the prior 300 years, there was so much less change. And with that much change well, obviously it's going to have an impact on culture, but to assume that culture is coming from the top down in an environment where change is so breakneck pace, a lot of that change is really going to be coming from the bottom up. And so what I'd like to put out there for everyone to think about and talk about is how we can contribute in our expectations and in our requests from juniors to seniors, and from seniors what they offer to juniors, to allow the culture to change. Because for most of my life, and probably in the present as well, when we hear about works of architecture, they are usually associated with an individual and credited to an individual. And of course, we all know that that's ridiculous. There is no individual that executes a work of architecture single-handedly. And so there needs to be a way to have a much more open, visible, active, engaged participation of people at all levels, because the profession and the final product will only be better because of it. So why don't we, I offer that as a place to jump off.
Yeah, I'll jump in too. I think that so many great things there. I completely agree. Sometimes one thing I've thought too is that this era, people think of it as an era defined by a rapid rate of change. So to me, it's the technology is one of those things that's rapidly changing. But to me, it's so many things, like things just, and I know people probably, different generations or eras felt like there was this rapid change as well. But the way that our culture and daily lives have changes and shifts constantly around these big changes, to me means we need to be open to change, you know what I mean? And constantly learning to rethink and reshape our expectations. So I completely agree with that. And I also was going to comment on, a question I've had from millennials and older, I think, I identify as a millennial, if that helps, isn't it hard to teach Gen Z? People say, oh, isn't it hard to teach Gen Z? And I say, no, I actually think there's something about this optimism of saying, I've had students say this, this assignment or the syllabus, it's an enormous amount of work that is going to we change that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that the transparency and discussion around that's a positive. And I say, okay, let me explain to you why that's assignments here. Look at the schedule. It's partially so that you get your Thanksgiving break, or I'm just saying it's sort of, I think opening up ourselves to those discussions in a real way is really just one of those, and listening again to people who are pushing that change is really, I completely agree with the bottom up approach that's necessary now. So I completely agree.
Well,
Curious
and
what
just
others'
equally
thoughts.
valid as part of the
Equally
conversation.
valid. Equally valid.
And
To chime
there,
in on that. Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Nina.
go ahead, Christine. No, I was
No,
just,
yeah, just about the bottom up, can't agree with that more. And Amanda, to your point about the Gen Zers, doing recruiting for a living and a lot of what we do, a lot of Gen Zers come across my desk, and at first I was baffled and actually a little upset, because it felt like, what? I had to sleep under my desk, the hours I had to put in, like, you should have to initiate yourself like I did. But I actually appreciate that they are pushing the boundaries and are pushing for that work-life balance in our industry. I mean, interiors is just as bad. I was focused on hospitality for the majority of my career, and that B2B world is tough. A lot of toxic cultures. That's kind of something I'm trying to change from the inside out, as in my consulting firm as well, is not taking on nasty firms when I know they have a reputation for that. But, I really do think it is going to happen from the bottom up, that they are pushing for what feels like ridiculous and unfair for what we came up in. But I actually appreciate it. And I think that it almost makes me feel like, where were we standing up for ourselves back in the day? So I'm proud of it. Yeah.
I said, all they're doing is in front of me that we would have gone and said to each other, like our friend, we would have been like, that instructor, studio instructor Amanda assigned too much work. And we would have said it to each other. They're just the only, I mean, I don't hate that they're saying it in front of me instead, but someone has their hand raised.
Talisha.
but we want to hear from everyone on this Zoom call, especially everyone who's got their cameras off. If you're there, please open your cameras, and if you have questions you're too shy to ask in person, put them in the chat.
Well, Talisha, a former mentor of ours, is here and has her hand raised and would love to ask a question.
Yeah, I think it's partly a question, partly a statement, and I'll try to be as succinct as possible, because Anik has heard me step up onto a soapbox about this very issue of Gen Zers. So, okay. I sort of feel like I agree that we definitely have a lot to learn from Gen Zers, younger people now who are able to stand up for themselves, who are able to put out, I can't even remember the word, like put a stop to over usage or it's not called barriers, but boundaries. There you go. See, I can't even remember the word, right? So that shows where I'm at with that. Not really. But anyway, I think that all of that is great. And I also feel that there is still a place for actually working towards something, accomplishing something by taking the steps to get there and not just, you know, not just dreaming up that things should be that you should go from 0 to 100, like, straight out of school or off the bat. So I do think that there are certain boundaries that maybe I do sort of see that the Gen Zers, the younger people, are kind of crossing without having the passport, to do it. Like,
100%. Yeah. I don't disagree with you there. I think it's sort of to me, it's sort of the learning process like anything else. So like I was saying, when students have said push back on a certain amount of work or certain number of hours, it's sort of, again, I think sometimes the difference I feel like between, when I, you know what I mean, when I was a bit younger and now is that it felt like we just were work to work or do it to do it. You know what I mean? Or there wasn't very much transparency about why or what's going on there. And I think some of what I feel like asked for is just more of that, like, just being transparent and open about like your own journey and the realities of it. And to me, it's like one example in my own life is that work is work, so a job, like sometimes like you're at an architecture firm, and it's a job and you have to get things. And for me, some things that I want or like to do, so doing more research or academia or other things basically required me, it's almost like I had to work more, or people will look at my schedule, they're like, oh, you must be a workaholic or not sleep because you teach and you work at the firm and you do those things. And it's like, honestly, I think to keep my sanity or to really enjoy what I do, I needed to add on a little bit more, but just other force my architecture job to be everything I needed it to be. I think that diversifying, adding a few more things actually like helped free up some of my energy in a way, if that makes any sense. And so I think learning that that's one of those things to me that I've tried to mentor some younger people on is you might be trying to ask too much of that job. So when you're saying like, you might have to get things done, you know what I mean? That architecture job might not be able to provide all of that lack of boundaries or all those freedoms or things that you're trying to do just in that. And you might need to seek that elsewhere as well. So I think it's pushing the culture, but then also knowing the realities of that.
But then I just want to say that I think that also goes to what Christine was saying before, and what you were explaining, that sometimes, you said it, Amanda, that, sometimes it's not enough to say that the door is open. How do you show that the door is actually open, and that goes for, I feel like, opportunities for, just being able to poke your head in and seeing that, oh, well, maybe teaching is the right thing for me to do, as opposed to working in traditional practice. Or for Christine, it was obviously something even different than, than teaching or being in a traditional practice setting. So I guess I have a sort of a question back is because I do feel like it's difficult to answer. How do you make those doors wide open, not just cracked open or don't just put an open sign on the door, but how do you actually make those doors wide open when there are so many, when you don't know what you don't know. And maybe that's a question back, maybe that is a response, I don't know. But I guess that is the question leads to another question, because like it'll be different for everybody, right? Like yeah, it just will be. And Christine said earlier that if you're saying that there's something that I should be doing, then that you're off track. Paraphrasing, and maybe wrongly paraphrasing, but
I was gonna say, yeah, I'll let Christine go first.
but sometimes it is a matter of maybe that should is something that you should follow. You're just unsure of yourself, and so
Possible. And I think that's a good point. I think what's important is to just allow yourself to explore those options, right? Even if it is a should, go explore it. And I think it's a saying yes. Now, this is the complete opposite of what everyone tells women. Start saying no, right? So that's kind of a different topic. But when you're doing exploration for yourself, not the areas you should be saying no to when everyone asks you for something else. When you're exploring first, it's a yes to everything. Go explore it and try it on. I always like to call it trying on. Actually, if you think you want to go be a business consultant, you reach out and you don't just do it in a vacuum exploring it. You reach out and you literally try it on and say, Christine, I'd love to shadow you for half of a day. Give it a shot. You have no idea, right? So even the wildest of things, and something my mom taught me was just go try it. Just do it. She said, just do it all the time. Yeah, I think Nike got it from her. So she's ahead of her time. So just do it. Just go try things, as crazy as they might seem, for yourself, because you deserve it. So I want to make sure we keep time for, I see the hand raised, but
well, if I could just interject for a moment, I would extend that to say, in addition to just do it, just ask. Because as a young architect rising in the profession, so many times there are things you need to engage with someone more senior about. And as often as, well, all the time, really, they are happy to answer those questions. They are happy to give you those opportunities. So be bold in asking for them. And yes, I know Amanda wants to add something. And after that, I think Inswida, is that the right way to pronounce your name? I think Inswida has a question, so we can pivot
For
to
sure,
that next.
yeah.
Right,
The
go
only thing
ahead,
I was
Amanda.
the only thing I was gonna say is, I wasn't sure if Talisha, that if you were asking how do you opening doors for yourself, which I was gonna say, or Christine speaking to, but to me also in terms of some of the like recruiting or not even recruit, like others know that we want them or that the door is open to them. To me, one example, it's like sounds as corny as it sounds, but I think something like the HBCU recruiting sessions, people were, when I was asked, at SOM or Kieran Timberlake, other place, like, oh, how do we get more applicants, of color or from underrepresented minority groups or, et cetera. And it's like, we should be actively going to these HBC recruiting, are actively seeking students. Also, Yale, Berkeley, several great architecture programs didn't have tables at the NOMA conference. NOMA, National Organization of Minority Architects. So, to me, I was like, if you have a table there, you're saying, hi, we came here to find you. And SOM is a sponsor of the student design competition at the NOMA conference. And then some of these students are so talented. Wouldn't it be great if they wanted to work here? I was like, go invite them to apply for a summer internship. So to me, that's again, I'm not saying that's good enough, but I think that those are the kinds of actions that I've tried to take. I don't, it's not enough, but I've also been trying to ask, like, what are ways that people would know that they're more beyond welcome, but that, you know, we want them, and we want, so I think we're all figuring it out like day to day. But, okay. And yes, the question.
Hello everyone, I'm Minsuita, and I wanted to say first, thank you for having such a great meeting and opportunity for us to meet with all of you. Before I ask my question, I'm going to give a little bit of a background so my question makes sense. I recently graduated from Spitzer School of Architecture here in the city, near Manhattan, just this May, and while I was in school, of course, I also had my share of sleeping and not sleeping under my desk for a week to get my finals together. But and I was working in private while I was in school. But once I graduated, I started thinking about being a registered architect, and that made me think, if our culture in school is so hard and strict in a way of how many hours of sleep I get to get this final done, you know, these deadlines need to be met. I decided to go the route of working for the city. So as of right now, I'm not exactly doing design. I'm doing project management and DDC, Department of the Design and Construction. And the reason why I went behind that is a lot of women who I've spoken to about taking their exams, it takes a lot out of you, and it takes years and years for you to pass them. So I wanted to have something that I can have my regular 8 to 4, and I don't have to worry about my deadlines. I don't have to come in the weekend. I don't have to be there at 12. So that's helping me toward my journey right now with my exams. So now that leads to my question being, once you've been away from design, and so in a way for, let's say, 5 years or 10 years, how long that's going to take me to pass my exam, and you come back to architecture firm and looking for a position such as a junior designer, they're going to look at you like you've been out of the field in a way for so long. What makes you think you're such a great fit to come back, even though now you are a licensed architect? So in a way, since we were talking about culture, I'm thinking, if we decide to go a certain way to get licensed, and then they're coming back to us, well, you haven't been in the field, what would be an approach in that? I know it's a broad question. It's just something I've always thought about, since this is the path that I picked.
So I would love to take that on. And in Sweden, I have to congratulate you and say you've made a smart choice in allowing yourself the necessary time to take your exams and pass them. It's not going to be 10 years. But, you know, if you can keep your feet wet in design in some way while you're doing that at the DDC, even if it's just sketching, it will serve you well. But I would just point out that there are many firms that are going to look at your DDC experience, and they're going to consider it an enormous asset, because a lot of design firms want to work for the DDC, and there's no surer way to understanding better how to do that than hiring somebody who has come from the DDC.
100%.
And similarly, large firms especially often have staff that are deployed more towards project management and others that are deployed more towards design. So you can get your foot in a door with a project management background. You are not out of architecture. You're just in one of the different avenues of architecture, of which there are many. So who else would like to add to that?
I definitely would say, I think part of the, to me, cultural shift is I do think we tend to be in a vacuum or silo a little bit, where you're like, where we think you have to have studied architecture, you have to have done this, or you have to know Rev. And I think as someone, especially, maybe it's also a little bit of the San Francisco influence, where, you know, people say that one of the things is you hire people who are great thinkers, who are, you know what I mean, who are great mobilizers, who, the fact that you're here, you're obviously, you know what I mean, like motivated, you're doing the right things. So I think that all of those things are things that people should look for as well. And the exams, more power to you. You know, I always say, like, blood, sweat, and tears are left in those. It's like, it's very tough. And I just think that there are so many it's definitely something like I have full faith that you can get through it. For me, it took some time. It's not, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I finished it all in a year. Absolutely not. It took time, and I also needed to take breaks. You know what I mean? From all of that examining. And I just think that there's so many opportunities available to you because of that rich knowledge and experience of things and ways of thinking. I would say there's room in the field for all of it. So I think something that we're made to think in school is if you can't design a museum from scratch and model it and maybe want to detail do this, like, oh, well, then you're not a designer, like, or you can't work in an architecture firm. And that's just not true. There are people who are doing project management. There are people who are more engaged with clients and speaking. There are people who are, doing drawings or modeling. There's room for, and I hate sometimes that's a perception, is that you have to have been, you know what I mean, like the best. If you had the best final review in studio, then you're going to be the best employee. It's just not the case. So Christine, she was like, yeah, I was going to chime in on that too.
Yeah, I do want to piggyback on that. There is a book called Unapologetically Ambitious, and I am not going to remember her name. She is a Black woman in California. She was in Silicon Valley. She's the first Black woman CEO of a tech company. That's all I got. I can't remember her name right now. You have to look it up. And what I think was so crucial from reading that was that, like you were saying, Amanda, just the different roles. But what she suggested and what she did was she went out and looked and researched. And this is before like the internet was really a thing. So this is so easy to do now. Go look at all the people you want to go be and try to find a path of their journey, or call them and ask, hi, how did you get to where you are? Because a lot of those principles at those architecture firms, project management, right? People management of the clients. If you can have that skill, I'll bet you a lot of them, at least 50% of them, had that journey, if that is the route that you continue to go down. Now, if you do want design, I think there is, like Nancy was saying, you will step into a project management role, which you could get pigeonholed. So you may want to supplement your time right now still doing design, because that likely will happen. But I think just looking at the paths that those leaders took is crucial. And she actually, in the book, you'll see she actually followed like to a T. She had to do sales in order to be a CEO. So she went and did sales, and she didn't even like sales. It was an incredible story. So food for thought.
Well, if I could add just one more note, I'm sure there are plenty of people at the DDC who are engaged in more design focused roles. And you can also chat with them about what they're doing so that you don't get entirely away from the design elements, even though it's not your primary responsibility, or even maybe your responsibility at all. You're still going to be adjacent to it in a way that's going to inform your career and your future steps.
Thank you. Thank you all for all your responses. Those were very, very, very helpful.
I just wanted to add one thing. It's a privilege that you're in New York City because there's so many opportunities to network. So the time you take to get your license is the time you're preparing for your next job. So it's the right time to connect with the people who will give you your next job. So just look out for the events that are happening around the city. Like, make a list of the firms that you aspire to be in, and just use this time to connect with them. And then when the time is right, just be like, hey, I want to work with you, and they'll know you personally. So but it would be 10 times easier actually to get through the door.
I would say so too. Thank you.
That's very true. And I wanted to point out the Alloy Block visit next week. The tour is given not just by Jennifer Grosso, who is an architect working for Alloy Development, but her colleague, Allie, who's the director of construction for the project. And, to echo what's being said here is that there's not just design and architecture, there's a huge number of roles for all different personalities, whether you're a people person like Christine, or you're a detail-oriented person who's designing details, or you're really excited about materials. Well, Allie's main job is to be on the site every day and to figure out what trades need to be on site and whether they have the materials to do their work. And she's just like an organizer of construction, and she loves it. She just radiates joy because it's the thing that gives her pleasure. So, there's lots of avenues, as Nancy is saying. It doesn't mean that, design is sitting down, designing a building, but design is also designing a schedule, seeing all the cats, herding the cats of a project. So that is, you could feel tremendous joy in achieving that part of the program as well.
Well, and similarly, going back to, I think it was our second year, we had a speaker named Nicole, who at the time was literally the technical director at SOM. And and she was probably 40 years old. And I know that a lot of people glaze over and aren't that excited when they hear about working in the technical department. But I literally yesterday was telling somebody how awed I was and how proud I was to be presenting her as an example in that session, because she literally spoke to us about how she had personally managed the construction of One World Trade Center as a 40-year-old woman, which was so amazing. So, there's many, many things out there that you can do that the background you're getting now it is going to support really well. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.
So I believe we have a question from Lori. Turn on your mic. Let's hear from you.
Hi, thanks. Thank you. Thank you for everything that you everybody's shared and talked about. It's been really beneficial, and I appreciate it. My question for you is, so I'm at a point in my career where I have about 11 years of experience. I've completed my hours for licensure. I've started studying for the exams. I took a break. I need to take all 6. But I'm at a point where I'm not working right now, and I'm really reevaluating what direction I want to go in with my career. So I'm starting to look at the firms I really want to work for. Like, who do I really want to work for? And I've started to apply to them. And I've also started to think about starting my own business. And I think that's going to happen towards the end of the year, early next year. So really, I'm just starting from scratch. And my question is what advice would you give to start figuring out what type of business do I want to have? And a lot of the things that you've brought up in this discussion today, integrity is one of them. I want to have a firm that has integrity and encourages people of all generations to really work together and really discuss solutions and to keep the conversation going and evolving over time. So I've heard, reaching out to people that I admire and want to follow a similar path. Reading the book, Designing for Life, I think.
Designing Your Life. Mm-hmm.
Designing Your Life. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other advice or thoughts? I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm happy to jump in here.
No, Angelique. Yeah.
Yeah, I've gone through this pretty recently, and I'm pretty early into starting my own business, really just at the end of 2022. So this is all pretty fresh. For me, finding out, I should say, it was really when I got my license in 2019 that I really started to wonder, what I wanted to do next with it. And after working maybe about 10 years in the field, I really was wondering what the next phase of my career would be. And I had big plans to travel. I was going to take a 2-month sabbatical, and I was going to write, and I was going to travel. I was going to go to South America and Chile, and I was going to figure out what I wanted to do next. And then, as you might expect, based off of the timeline of the end of 2019, that's when we got hit with COVID. And so I wasn't able to travel. I got all of my travel money refunded. And what I did instead was I got a mid-career coach, which was helpful and was one of the best things that I did, because you can rattle a lot of ideas around in your mind, and especially after 10 years of working in the profession, or for you, I think you said it's about 11 years or so of experience. you may in some ways disconnect even from where you were when you started out in the profession, or lose sight of other interests or things that you've been curious about that you haven't explored over the course of that time, or really ask yourself the critical questions of, well, if I had to do this, for myself, what would I do differently? How would I reimagine this? If I were to throw everything away and just imagine what I wanted as a career for myself, what would that look like? Having a career coach helped me to do that. Now, you don't necessarily have to have a career coach to do that. It happened to help me, but I would say it's worth really seriously evaluating, what you love about what you're currently doing, what you don't love, what, you'd like to continue, what you want to do differently. And not just in your work, but in your life. Because ultimately, if you do choose to, whether you choose to build a business or choose to, work for another company, what does your day look like? What does your work-life balance look like? Who are your collaborators? Just really give yourself the chance to imagine it for yourself and really think it all through. And you won't know everything that will define what happens next, but it'll give you a starting point to then map out starting your own business. And then as you decide what those things are, then you can reach out to people. That was kind of my next step. When I figured out that I wanted to do architecture and development, I started talking to people, started telling people in my network and having informational interviews and talking to people who were doing development and finding out what that was like. I shadowed, a development project that Nancy is working on to figure out, how do you even do this? How do you get the financing for these projects? How do you pitch an investor deck? It's just worth then talking to people and finding out more about the things that you're interested in doing and seeing whether or not there'll be a fit, and then you can build from there into your next steps.
Oh,
I had a question for you.
yeah, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, the only thing I was going to say is that like something I've asked people is like, what's your favorite experience that you've had like at a firm working on a project or in the firm culture itself? Like what's something that you remember that was like awesome or like brings you to happy sort of memory like that? And like if you can just have more of that thing, you know what I mean? I specifically mean like in not just something that makes you happy in general, but specifically in your work, a type of project you enjoyed, a little part of a piece of the project, or some sort of event that you did as a firm together. Any of those things, if you can like find one of those and like try to integrate that and then find a way that that's like part of the of at least your weekly or monthly work, I think that for it. But Christine.
Lori, did you say, how long have you worked in the architecture industry?
About 11 years of like actual work experience.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, then I would piggyback on everything Amanda just said. And Angelique. That's good. Okay. Nothing more to say here.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you so much.
Sure. I'd also recommend, I just read this book, Naked at Work, funny enough, has anyone heard of this? Maybe not, but it was by, I'm forgetting this young woman's name, but she is a CEO, has built multiple companies and actually is one of the former clients of one of our mentors, Kathy Gallo. And it's about, leading authentically. And she offers these really wonderful exercises that she got from one of her, series of coaches. But it was an exercise to, speak about how you would describe yourself. What are the things that you've accomplished? What are the things that you're uniquely qualified to contribute? What are the things you stand for? What are the things that you believe in? I think those series of questions or exercises are also a really good place to start in terms of figuring out where you want to go and what you want to do next. I really like the book. It's a pretty quick and easy read, and I recommend it too.
I'd like to add also, Lori, that, if you want to start by having some half-hour conversations with people like us, I volunteer for a half-hour conversation. Looks like
For sure.
Angelique just volunteered. I see
For
Christine
sure.
waving her hand a
Yeah.
little bit. So that's 3 right there. And then just keep adding them up and, adding a new person and asking a different question and finding out someone else's perspective on how they have tackled these very questions on their own path in the industry. So feel free to reach out to me separately and I will happily schedule a half hour with you.
I would. Thank you so much. I really
Sure.
appreciate that. I'd love to talk to all 3 of you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely reach out.
Send my email address to you in the chat.
Sure. And
Okay.
actually, I do have something to say that I want everyone to hear, and that is we as women tend to be perfectionists, and it's nothing to be proud of. Everyone should start practicing being good enough. And so, Lori, I would say to you is you're not waiting till, whatever it is, the website or whatever it is you think you need to launch is perfect. It's good enough. And you get it going. You move the needle, you have progress, because guess what? You wait till perfect is there, which by the way is unattainable. And then you find out, oh, wait, this isn't even what I want. You have to fail fast, right? Facebook's motto. I believe in that so wholeheartedly. So be that good enough and know that that's amazing. And I actually, Amanda, when we were talking about culture shift, I think so much about culture shift in the architecture world. I do think about it not only as BIPOC, but that doesn't include just women, right? No. It's women, right? So when I was going through architecture school, I think there's 2 of us. And we were both white, actually. So wow, terrible demographics. And what was hard was the men were more supportive of me than the one other, right? We as women do not support each other. It is just, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to throw out another book. And by the way, I don't read these books cover to cover. I read half of them. I get the gist and I move on, right? It's that good enough. So I just want to put it out there. I'm not fitting that into my schedule. So I don't want to set some bar. And the book is by Abby Wambach, that famous soccer player, and it's called Wolfpack. And now this I have read front to back. It's, I don't know, 80 pages. It's very short. And it talks about how to redefine how we work together as a team, as women. So it's like changing our dynamics as women, the rules by which we engage, and there's like 8 of them. So that, hands down, the good enough. And then a culture shift, I think, is actually how we support each other, which goes back to the mission of MWA.
And to your mom saying, just do it.
Absolutely. I got to tell her she got a shout out today. She gets shout outs a lot. She's actually.
I love that. I was gonna say, I also really appreciate the saying no, learning to say no. I think it's like, to me, I go through waves of times when it's like yeses and nos. And I think that that's like just knowing yourself and knowing when you need that. I was recently term JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. And I use it wholeheartedly when, sometimes it's sometimes feels really good just to be able to take the time you need, time and space you need for yourself. So not only just so not even just, but even in thinking about like what your company could be, or it's in all of that, I think it's it doesn't have to be and do every single thing. It's sort of just find one thing you for it.
Love it.
Thank you. I like the overwhelming support from like an amazing group of women. It's like it's like it's something I've been looking for. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nancy and Anita.
So I'd just like to point out that, we are modeling the change we want to see. And to Amanda's comments about culture, this is how you make and change culture, or rather change and make culture. And so, we've created this series to champion each other's efforts and to support each other's growth and development and advancement in an industry that we have experienced to be not so hospitable, not as much certainly as we would like. And, in so doing, we're creating and changing culture. So as the model, rinse, repeat in whatever way you see fit, because this is how we create an industry that feels more like we want it to be as we go forward.
Well said, Nancy. And also, taking the time to pause and talk to one another, because we're all so busy. And if we don't pause once in a while and put our heads up and talk to each other and bounce ideas. Sometimes we might miss out on opportunities or you know, those thoughts about pursuing different activities in our day and in our careers that we might discover we're good at something we didn't even know about and that we enjoy it, but we never took the time to try.
Or maybe we're not good at it, but we just like it.
Right. The being able to fail and fail fast, as Christine is saying, that you learn a lot about yourself by trying something and hating it and moving on.
That's right.
I was gonna say thank you again so much for having me, for having us. It's like always, well, sometimes when you feel in the field, can feel very like lonely, or it's like no one understands how hard architecture is or what our field is like. And like look around, like everybody here really does know what it's like, and you're not alone. And so for me, that's joining an organization or joining sort of a mentorship group can be an awesome way of actually like lifting the burden by, you know, doing something for an hour and a half. It's like you can come away from it feeling lighter, which is always really, really a pleasure. So thank you again. Thank you, Nancy and Anique.
Yeah, agreed.
Are there
Thank
any
you.
other questions? Surely there must be.
Left our emails in the
I'm
chat.
sure you've mentioned it, but all the organizations that are out there, as students or beginning in the career, right? Oh, they eat that up. So look at organizations too. Forgot about that. And I'm just going to put a plug in there. I'm sure you've mentioned this, Nancy, but Brick and Wonder, right? Oh my gosh.
Yep.
I don't know.
Well, there's
Wow.
many different organizations that are interesting in showing you different paths. And even if you're not committing to membership, just investigating them can be really informative. And sometimes it's great to pick something that is really far afield from your primary focus. So maybe it's attending an engineering organization's event or a real estate organization's event, or, you know, a ULI event for young professionals, something like that. Because it gives you an entirely different perspective on your own industry, very different than the path you've been following thus far to become a practicing architect.
Completely. I was gonna say, to me, like visual art is one that for me, it's like, you know, even like joining a museum or going to a museum event, or like just looking at visual art, it makes me feel inspired and so different. It's obviously architecture adjacent, but it's different, and it's like finding some of those things that just help you feel some of that energy. Or something where I'm terrible at pool and friends love playing pool, and it's nice to, like I said, failing at something, it's like, I'm not good at this, so I can have just a very casual, fun time, you know? So I think that whether it's that or trivia or different things, just learning how to turn your brain off can also just be really refreshing. So whether it's architecture organizations or just something else, I say go for it.
Well, Angelique, she's part of lots of organizations. You should tell everyone about architects and what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, for those of you that received our newsletter, and maybe some of you have not, there are tons of things going on this month alone, that if you're interested in networking with other women in the profession that are not just amazing, but interested in being mentors. Yes, architects with two X's at the end. EXX is a 501c3, a not-for-profit organization advocating for gender equity in academia and in the profession of architecture. And it was founded by Lori Brown, who is still very active on the board with us. And they provide resources of mentoring, the advocacy for women's rights, all kinds of women's rights. But Lori is also very known for her work on authorship, on, you know, designing safe spaces for abortions and women's rights on that front as well. She's an educator at Syracuse, and has kind of branched out a lot of her research and impact around the city, around New York City, but also around the country. with Architects Now and things like that. Additionally, there's AIA New York, the Women in Architecture Committee, that have committee meetings every other month and a gang of programming throughout the year. They have an amazing International Women's Day event coming up on the 21st as well. I know you guys heard from Haley Cooper Smith that has an event that night as well. So it's a toss up of which you choose. But the International Women's Day event will have a featured speaker, Dr. Sharon Sutton, who has been a pioneer for women's rights and Black women's rights in the industry for, God, I don't even want to say how many years. She was born in 1942, if that tells you anything. But she's amazing. She's still teaching, and I'll have the honor of interviewing her and asking her some questions in the fireside chat portion of that event. So yeah, definitely AIA. New York's Women in Architecture Committee. They are a partner of ours. Their former co-chair Vivian Lee is one of our mentors. And they're constantly putting on great programming that we also support. And so we'll continue to share things with you that we know about that we think may be useful to you guys.
Well, if no one else has any questions, we don't want to drag you into the wee hours of the evening, especially since in San Francisco you have some daylight left you might want to take advantage of. But yeah, if there are no more questions, I just want to wish everyone a really great night and evening, and I hope that we'll see some of you in Brooklyn on the 21st or the 22nd or both. And thank you, Christine and Amanda, for taking the time to share your stories with us and your advice and all of your readings.
And come back.
Great books. Come back. Yes.
Everyone, not just our mentors. Come join us again sometime, like Talisha.
Absolutely.
And you can join us on May 16th. It'll be our last seminar of the 2023-24 season, with more to come for the summer. But on May 16th, we'll have 3 speakers: Astrid Lipka, Francine Monaco, and Margie Lavender. And so we'll get together again. Hopefully you'll join us then.
So thank you all for having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Same here.
Have a great night.
evening.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Have
Good
a
night,
blessed
you
everyone.
too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.